While you're watching SABC News live from Johannesburg, and these are your headlines at this hour. There are calls for Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to consider an alternative model to zero rating certain food items, as this does not necessarily address the affordability of those items for poor households.
I know very well the African Union for having attended most of the events there for the past 2 decades. So I think I have, the profile.
Djibouti's Foreign Affairs Minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf has been elected as the new African Union Commission chairperson in Addis Ababa. Headlines further afield, the Vatican has confirmed that Pope Francis will not lead this week's traditional Sunday prayers at St. Peter's Square due to hospitalization for respiratory infection. A very warm welcome. Welcome to the week ahead. We are live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. We're with you for the next 2 hours. Thanks for tuning in. I am Liesl Wilson. Perhaps if you want to keep the conversation going, just interact with us, you're welcome to give us a call. Share your thoughts, pose some questions. That number to dial is 011 714 0680 or ending in 81 or 82. But as that conversation ensues, let's take a look at what we have in store for you. It's wonderful to have you with us. Let's delve straight in. All right, welcome back. So, as with tradition, we're going to take a look at your top stories, perhaps also those top stories making headlines on the newspaper front. We've got the Sunday Times, the Sunday Tribune, and the Sunday World. Well, Sunday Times is on your screen right now. Let's look at that big headline that reads, Trump will humiliate us. SA team headed to Washington, rallies allies for fear. So, as we know, it was announced at SONA, team will be traveling to France and Germany, China, Brazil, and other allies to try to muster support ahead of talks in Washington over breakdown in relations. So we're really just looking at the geopolitical landscape that is shifting and some of the remarks that have, been quite contentious, particularly with the signing in or following the signing in of various bills, including the expropriation bill in South Africa. So Lizega Tandwa and Warisang Hosana writes, the top level team from South Africa is sending a team to Washington to try to mend the breakdown in relations. They will first be traveling to China, then to France, then to Germany, and then other countries to win their support and try to avoid humiliation in the US. Well, their mission is to counter the biggest diplomatic crisis that South Africa's faced since democracy in 1994, precipitated this month when President Donald Trump cut all aid to the country because of its anti-Israel stance and also alleged land grabs that were targeting white Afrikaners. So that team, as it stands, whose members will be named after President Cyril Ramaphosa returns from the AU summit in Addis Ababa this weekend, will be traveling to those countries. So that's a very big story that is set to make headlines perhaps well into the week. So we'll be monitoring that as it unfolds. Another big story we're anticipating, of course, is a finance minister addressing the nation, addressing investors as well. This ahead of the budget speech. So we do know that there are many concerns given, the state of the economy and perhaps some of the challenges. The big question is, will the finance minister be increasing taxes? Will he not? Will it be satisfactory? Question on everyone's lips. So writes, on the inside of the Sunday Times on page 2. And another spotlight there on the MK Party in politics. On page 4, MK Party Deputy President John Hlophe is said to have questioned the integrity of Mzwanele Manyi, the party's chief whip. That was during a heated meeting attended by party leader Jacob Zuma this week. So those are some of the big stories that are making headlines on the Sunday Times. Let's continue now with more news. We've got the next newspaper coming to the screens. We've got the Sunday Tribune. Sunday Tribune, of course, based in KZN. So it says there, no relief yet for taxpayers. It's still focusing on that big story that we'll be monitoring. Economists saying that we need to be focusing on long-term goals, growth rather. So writes Philippa Larkin, taxpayers should not expect any significant tax hikes or immediate relief when the budget speech is delivered on Wednesday. Some mixed reactions coming through, but some experts on the fence about what we can expect. The budget is rather set to focus on long-term growth and fiscal prudence with the potential for a more stable economic future as well. Just to the right of that big headline there, it's a diamond anniversary for Sunny Suku, who turns 79 today. His wife Maya, who's next to him, is 78. And they celebrated their diamond wedding anniversary on Valentine's Day. The concept of Valentine's Day was unfamiliar when they got married 60 years ago. That is what Leon Lestrade writes on page 4. We've also got another big story that we're following. Tashika Pillay writing the SASSA grant beneficiaries in distress. So the month-long extension for SASSA beneficiaries to mandatory switch from the SASSA Gold cards to the new Postbank Black cards is not enough. The agency announced on Friday, of course, as we know, that the new deadline, it was moved to the 20th of March. But pensioners and political parties, in fact, fear that it will not be enough to accommodate those who are still struggling to change their cards. So that is another big story we're keeping an eye on. That continues on page 3 as well. And then just below that picture there, SIU probes eThekwini water and sanitation. Zanul Dawood writes, the SIU, the Special Investigating Unit, has initiated an investigation into the eThekwini municipality's water and sanitation unit. This is just with regards to the provision of communal ablution blocks to informal settlements. The inquiry stems from concerns over alleged maladministration and also improper conduct by municipal officials related to these facilities, which were crucial for enhancing sanitation access in an area where the need remains rather dire. So you can continue to read that story, which is the headline, of course, there on the Sunday Tribune. From the Sunday Times to the Sunday Tribune, rounding off with the Sunday World, let's take a look at those headlines coming through. We've got ANC mayor vanishes after sex video goes viral. More on page 2. Tembisa Mdoda, second marriage on the rocks. More on page 3. ANC Youth League under fire for election of all male leadership. That continues on page 6. Kaizer Chiefs boss faces a 3.4 million rand lawsuit. Landlords demand 6 from stranded NASFA students. That story continues on page 10. And then the big story they're leading there, Mbeki hints that Zuma was a spy. Former president stuns National Executive Committee meeting by questioning his ex-deputies' incarceration on Robben Island. So perhaps just browsing to page 5 there, Jacob Zuma, coming to the fore was on Robben Island as a plant of enemy forces. That's according to Thabo Mbeki. So writes Mawande Amashabalala and Quentin Masuebe. Former President Thabo Mbeki stunned NEC members when he tore into Jacob Zuma, questioning whether the trial that resulted in his conviction and imprisonment on Robben Island in fact took place. Mbeki, who stopped short of calling Zuma a spy, dropped the bombshell in that meeting. It was happening at the Birchwood Hotel in Boksburg, Ekurhuleni, just a few weeks ago, where they were discussing the poor electoral showing of the ANC in both Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. All right, so those are just some of the big stories, of course, on your newspaper fronts. It continues, and we'll continue to monitor those and other developments, perhaps as the day and the week progresses. Let's leave it there. We're going to continue with other big stories that we're anticipating for this week. Of course, as I mentioned, a budget speech is coming forth, and there are calls for Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to consider an alternative model to zero rating certain food items, as this does not necessarily address the affordability of those items for poorer households. The minister is due to table his 2025-2026 budget speech in Parliament on Wednesday, where the zero rating of 19 items has been in place since 1991. It's meant to cushion the poor against soaring prices. Let's take a look.
The zero rating of foodstuffs has had a positive impact on lower income and poor households since its introduction back in 1991, when only brown bread and maize meal were zero rated. This list has since expanded to cover 19 basic food items, including milk, rice, vegetables and eggs. In his opening of Parliament address on the 18th of July last year, President Cyril Ramaphosa stated that government will look to expand the basket of essential food items exempt from value-added tax and undertake a comprehensive review of administered prices. Tax expert at Cliff Decker Hofmeyer, Gerard Badenhorst, says zero rating doesn't always make items affordable to poor and low-income households. He says targeted relief measures are a better option.
Use new products to the list that will lead to further loss of revenue or foregone revenue for the fiscus. Now, various studies have been conducted over the years, both locally and internationally, that indicated that the VAT system is not the optimal way in order to bring relief to the poor. And it's best achieved through specifically targeted relief measures. For example, the social grants or the old age social pensions, food vouchers, or even an expansion of the feeding scheme. So then you bring relief, specifically targeted relief to those people that need it the most. Because remember, zero rating benefits everyone. It's not only the poor low-income households that benefit from zero rating, but also high-income households. And in some instances, the high-income households benefit substantially more from the zero rating than lower-income households.
Pay the Grants, an advocacy group for SASSA beneficiaries, agrees that the grant is too low to meet the needs of poor households. Therefore, zero rating them is futile.
The value is too low. 370 Rand is basically food for 2 days. If you go to the shop, you can't even buy the proper basics that you need to actually even survive on a week, less. What about a month? Yet SASSA and the department expect people to survive on that amount of money for the whole month. Same like the CSG. Parents just had to purchase stationery, which the prices is very, very high of stationery. And these children now have to go hungry because all the money went to the school stuff for the past 2 months.
Late last year, Deputy Finance Minister David Masondo estimated that the cost of zero rating translated into a loss of 30 billion rands annually. At the same time, Badenhorst argues that there is also no guarantee that suppliers will pass the benefit of zero rating on to consumers. He says suppliers could keep the selling price of zero-rated food items the same as the current VAT-inclusive price on the pretense of higher costs of production.
Yeah, that is a concern because if you zero-rate additional food products, there is a big incentive for producers as well as retailers not to pass on the benefit of zero-rating, but to keep it and retain it as additional profit. Now, one can monitor it and put in control measures to put pressure on producers and retailers to pass on that benefit to poor and low-income households. But over the medium and longer term, it's going to be very difficult because there are a number of factors that impact on pricing. For example, producers may increase their prices due to higher input costs. Or if you zero rate an additional product, that may lead to additional demand for that product, which in turn may lead to shortages in the market, and those shortages will push up the price. So it is a difficult situation to control.
Badenhorst maintains that specifically targeted relief measures such as increased social grants and old age social pensions, food vouchers, and the expansion of the National School Nutrition Program are better suited to address the difficulties faced by poor households. Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Can the 2025 budget scheduled to be tabled on Wednesday help to alleviate the plight of the cash-strapped middle class? This is a question on the lips of some of those who fall into the dwindling bracket of the middle class and face enormous financial burdens in the current economic climate. In its latest credit stress report, 80/20 noted that households with an income from around 25,000 Rand a month can be classified as middle class. Now, they carry the burden of growing financial demands, taxes, stagnant salaries with below-inflation increases. All right, so let's continue. So on the back of those questions, of course, we know that the upcoming South African budget speech represents a pivotal moment for the country, offering a clarity on government's fiscal priorities, perhaps also the implementation strategies at large. The 2025 budget speech comes at a time when South Africa faces both significant challenges and opportunities. So we're going to continue to monitor these developments. Of course, on one hand, structural issues like SOE inefficiencies, low growth and high unemployment persist. Let's take a quick ad break. We will be back with Dr. Dale McKinney, who's going to be weighing in for all this and more. We'll be right back. Well, as I mentioned just before the ad break, welcome back. We're chatting all things budget. We know that the upcoming South African budget speech really represents a pivotal moment for the country, offering clarity on government's fiscal priorities and even implementation strategies at large. Now, the 2025 budget speech, it comes at a time when South Africa faces both significant challenges and opportunities. We, on the one hand, structural issues like SOE inefficiencies, low growth and high unemployment persist. But on the other hand, progress in areas such as energy reform and improved investor sentiment offers hope for the recovery. So it's also the first full budget by the new government of national unity. And the quest to see whether and where this change in governing dynamics made an impact is also going to be interesting. But I'm not the expert. Political analyst Dr. Dale McKinney is going to be joining us now to share his thoughts on really what we can expect. Dr. Dale, thanks for making time to be with us here on the SABC. Welcome.
Thanks, Liesl, and always a pleasure.
Well, let's delve in. I think perhaps before we zone in on the micro dynamics, let's get the lay of the land. Perhaps you could give us an overview of the current macroeconomic landscape, how that is going to be impacting us somewhat.
Sure. I think we can look at this in two ways. One is domestically, and obviously the other one is internationally. On the domestic front, look, we've got a situation where as was set out in the medium-term budget speech and previously, we have a conundrum, which is that our debt is rising. We have a situation where our growth is fairly static and low, even though projected to be a bit better in the next year or two. And where we have what we would call the structural constraints in the economy to raise taxes, to increase more investment, provides a sort of like a situation where serious decisions are going to have to be made in relation to macroeconomic policy, because from where I sit and where I disagree with quite a number of other economists in terms of this analysis, but from where I sit, basically, the macroeconomic program of the government is one which relies fundamentally on foreign investment. It relies fundamentally on the international markets to come into South Africa to invest. It relies on giving domestic corporate capital and business a lot of breaks in order to spur their own investment. In other words, and particularly since the GNU came in, there's a reliance on the private sector and to drive the economy. At the same time, internationally, what we have is with the coming of Trump and his administration in the United States, we have essentially a situation where the largest economy and the richest country in the world is basically retreating from those international investment and threatening countries like South Africa if they don't follow their political or ideological agenda. We see with AGOA and others that they're going to pull or they're going to punish us. So the international market, so to speak, which has been fairly consistent over the last 20 or 30 years, is now changing, and it's fundamentally unpredictable. So that creates even bigger challenges on the macroeconomic front, because if you rely on a domestic policy that is going to attract foreign investment, and yet you've got one of the largest countries in the world and the richest economies, which is our second largest trading partner, which is basically doing these kinds of very, very aggressive and confrontational things, you've got a situation where the decisions are not as easy as they used to be.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for painting that succinct picture. And perhaps as we then move closer to South Africa, perhaps internally or domestically, we've also heard some sentiments, observers saying that three critical areas that are going to be dominating discussions will be the state of SOEs, social and economic reforms, and even just fiscal sustainability. Would you agree with this? And if so, why?
Yes, in broad terms, I would say that those capture some of the big questions that we have. Let's take state-owned enterprises. We don't have to go retread this ground. We know what the challenges are. The question about SOEs, and this is fundamentally an ideological and policy question, was, do we privatize and corporatize? Do you, in other words, privatize the ports, break up Transnet, do all the things that people are pushing? And the GNU seems to be moving in that direction, to basically say, listen, as a state, we've more or less failed. So we're going to bring in the private sector to sort things out, and we're going to make those up, even though we'll still own the assets. I'm not convinced of that particular trajectory, but it's certainly one which I think is debatable and certainly will be front and center. Social reforms, absolutely. We still have a situation, again, we don't have to convince ourselves, of massive inequalities, of increasing poverty, of people, as some of your inserts previously, ordinary people basically struggling, really, really struggling in this economic environment. So the question is the GNU going to basically gravitate towards a much more sort of expansionary fiscal policy to try to essentially catalyze local economies, to provide, whether that's a basic income grant and pushing that up, or to provide the necessary means for ordinary people to grow local economies? Mm-hmm. And this is where the fundamental contradiction comes in. Do we grow the economy on the big things, or do we grow the economy on the small things, or you try to make them both at the same time? These are fundamental things that will have to be addressed. So yes, I think those issues that you've mentioned are quite a number of the crucial ones. But fundamentally, I think what we'll be looking for, and different constituencies will be looking for different things in this, will be what is the general sort of, how should we say, framing of these challenges, and whether or not we're going to basically abandon the state in some ways as a means of, because of all the corruption, because of this management, and we're going to turn and put all our marbles in the basket of the private sector. That fundamentally is the question for the GNU, because if they go down that route and it fails, well, then they're in big trouble.
Yeah, well, the world's watching with bated breath, perhaps even delving in deeper to some of the domestic issues. I mean, the recent decision by NERSA to approve tariff increases below Eskom's initial application. I mean, that's also raised potential questions about the utilities' financial sustainability and its implications for the national fiscus. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't buy into the argument that simply because Eskom didn't get the raises at once, it's in trouble. I mean, if you look at the past 20 years, our electricity prices have gone up over 300%. I think we're the one country in the world where the energy prices have gone up more than anywhere else. So it's not a question of just sucking the consumer more and more, and if we don't get what we want, we're in fiscal trouble. It's about Eskom itself reforming itself and dealing with its own internal problems. It's still got management problems, it's got supply chain problems, It's got infrastructural issues, and this is where the fundamentals of the state-owned enterprises, not just Eskom, the challenges are. The question is, how do you address those? And if you just band-aid them and basically say, okay, we're going to fix this in order so we don't have more load shedding, but you don't deal with the fundamental structural things of basically involving local communities and local people in the solutions and basically in the distribution networks as well, and you simply rely on the big boys to deliver these things, my sense is that you're not going to deal with the Eskom problem, because it's a problem of how you deliver energy and on what basis and what's important in your economy in terms of energy. So these are big questions that go way beyond whether the tariffs are rising or not.
Yeah, well, investors are going to obviously be watching and looking out for certain indicators as well, the low-hanging fruits as well. Before perhaps we get into that, I want to just also focus on the transport and logistics industry in South Africa, because Transnet's semi-privatization of ports and rail infrastructure, I mean, it also remains a critical focus area. And so in lieu of that, in lieu of exploring alternative sources as well, I mean, how can government outline the progress that has been done, also attracting private investment and participation whilst addressing the inefficiencies going forward?
Yeah, that's a big ask. I mean, because, let's take the Durban port, for example. Historic problems, obviously, with efficiencies, with being able to deal with volumes, labor issues with regards to the working conditions, safety, regulation, all sorts of other things. Now, the question, again, here, going back to my first sort of setting of the macroeconomic sphere, the question is, do you just then turn, as they've seemed to have done in the Durban, to a foreign private port operator to come in, take things over, and basically say, well, the private sector is going to do this more efficiently than we can, therefore that's who we're relying on. Well, international experience has shown that this is not always the case. It depends on whether or not, for example, your labor force, the ones who are working there, are treated properly. And otherwise you could get constant labor conflict, constant striking going on. The question also is whether or not you are going to be able to get the kind of revenue that you want. We saw with some of the deals with private sector public partnerships that the deals are much more in favor of the private sector. Oftentimes they are to our fiscus. So the question is, what is the state going to be getting out of these things? It's not about saying that we cannot have public-private partnerships. It's a question of saying who's going to be served and for what purpose. So if our focus is fundamentally on serving the corporates and the big ones and getting in, and lowering their costs, as opposed to, for example, making sure that our ports are functioning to the extent that our labor issues are taken care of and that the prices of things are going down because we're much more efficient in doing so, and that benefits the average consumer. Those are the fundamental questions. So it's not simply a simple thing about let's turn it over to a private sector. It's a question of how it's run and for what purpose.
Well, those are valid questions. Perhaps then from a GDP perspective, is there then hope that it will be the year that things start to turn around? And if so, how can we then drive growth towards that 3% that was announced by the president as well?
Yeah, listen, I think we are at a crossroads, and it's not just domestically, I think internationally, what we're talking about. Things are all over the place. Things are unpredictable. You don't know I think I've said this, and I know that we're in a minority as political economists in saying these things, but I think the international experience proves us correct, which is that if you want to grow the economy in a macroeconomic situation, international situation, which is totally unpredictable, where there's nationalism, where there's protectionism coming up, where all these barriers and tariffs are coming through, then it makes sense to turn to your local economies. It makes sense to build and invest in your local economies, to basically give people the opportunities to create businesses, small and medium scale businesses. And this is the biggest disappointment for me in the whole budget. And what I would expect is if all of your announcements and all of your attention is going to be on the big things and the big boys, so to speak, and not on the small and medium scale enterprises, and the medium budget terms basically gave very little attention to that and not much fiscal support to that, then I think we're going to retread these same cycles because if you rely on something that is unpredictable and you have no control over, well, then you're sort of sitting in a catch-22. But if you can consistently and over a 5 to 10 year period begin to invest in your local economies and turn that, you can grow your tax base, you can grow your economy, you can start dealing with poverty, inequality, and all those structural things that we talk about. So the fundamental question is, where are we looking and who are we looking to?
All right, so I need to wrap up, but I just want to get your view on this. Can government lower its debt trajectory? Can it also navigate fiscal deficiencies as well? But if we're going to be looking at expectations for revenue in the upcoming budget, are you foreseeing any tax increases of sorts? How would you weigh in as we wrap up?
Sure, I think there's a difference between what I would hope and what I think I expect.
Sure.
Let me start with what I would hope. I would hope that the government would basically look and say, if you look at the economy and look who's been benefiting over the last 3 years, it's the wealthy, it's the ultra wealthy. They've been getting richer, not just in South Africa, but elsewhere. The inequalities have been growing. Let's tax them more. And basically, let's go for those dividend taxes. Let's go for those capital gains taxes. Let's go for high net worth individuals. I don't mean in a negative way. I mean in paying your fair share. Because this is the fundamental, if we're going to have an equality of a contribution, you can't just because you're wealthy get away with it. And basically because you have political connections and lots of tax lawyers. We see how Elon Musk in the United States has done this. So I would expect that if we're going to get more revenue, let's get it from where the money is. Don't squeeze the small person. Don't try to squeeze out, again, all of the things where people are basically to such an extent that they're just trying to survive. However, what I would expect is a bit different. I expect that, unfortunately, in this case, Enoch Godongwana and the GNU are still looking to not basically roil the markets, or not. They're trying to please the big boys. They're trying to basically send the right messages to investors. So they're probably going to soft pedal on those kinds of things. I don't think they're going to raise many taxes many places because they're going to probably make an argument that that's not going to be good and it would strain the economy. And I think that instead they're going to focus on keeping inflation low and trying to keep the debt to GDP ratio low. In other words, a sort of classic kind of economic approach in this context. I think we need to be much more creative. I think they need to be much more bold and courageous in dealing with the situations we have on the tax front and making those that have pay more.
All right, Dr. Dale, we're obviously playing with an imaginary crystal ball at this point, but we'll leave it there. Thank you for sharing about your hopes, but your expectations as well. Of course, the 2025 budget will be tabled on Wednesday by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, political economist Dr. Dale McKinley joining us for that discussion ahead of Wednesday. Let's leave that there. We continue with perhaps more news where we're staying on the issue of budget. In the latest credit stress report, 80/20 noted that households with an income from around 25,000 Rand a month can, in fact, all right, let's leave that story there. The question about the 2025 budget scheduled to be tabled on Wednesday, perhaps to help alleviate the plight of the cash-strapped middle class. That's a question. I alluded to this earlier on before the chat with Dr. Dale McKinley. Let's take a look at this next package.
Growing bills with no relief inside. Many hardworking South Africans are battling to keep up with the increasing cost of staying alive. Even robbing Peter to pay Paul has become impossible. Some have now fallen into the trap of knocking on the doors of unauthorized money lenders.
People are struggling because anyone can knock at any time for people's money, school fees, which means that the salary, the level of the salary can't hold the people anymore due to the articles in the shop, and the shops are now too expensive. So they have to try to find the extra money, and going to the banks, it's requesting a lot of documents, or maybe they also have more debt, and they come to fetch the machinistas around town to see how they can try to survive and to cover their expenses.
This moneylender, who has been in business for 15 years, says over the past couple of years, her business has boomed with many people knocking on her door for money. She says her clientele includes doctors, entrepreneurs, public servants and domestic workers. She charges 20% interest on the principal debt per month, a fee higher than most financial institutions, but many are biting this bullet.
I started the business in 2010, and it was in a very slow way. I just tried, and I started with 4 people, and only one was a regular one. That's it, I started. And the amount that I started with, it was after a stock fall. I was having like 2,000 Rands in that time. I can say that I reached 150 customers, and the big amount is 90K.
Consumers who have to stretch their few rents say staying afloat has become impossible.
Salary stays the same, so that's we're not satisfied. And me as a consumer personally, I'm not satisfied with the prices, because if the petrol goes down, normally the food will go down, but the food will go up, or it could stay consistently the same price. So I'm not happy.
You know, not even talking about luxury items, just the basic food items like your milk, your coffee, your sugar. I mean, every month you come into a store, prices have gone up ridiculously. So one doesn't know where to stop buying. What do you buy? You need to live. Economy is also skyrocketed. I don't think it's fair on people, pensioners, especially pensioners. How do they cope with basic food ingredients nowadays?
A basket of basic food that many households purchase on a monthly basis has also increased. This has put more pressure on consumers who have a long list of financial obligations.
The problem in South Africa is affordability. We cannot access the food because the prices are too high and our incomes are too low to measure that. So affordability is the cause of household food insecurity in South Africa at the moment.
As many juggle between property and municipal raids, traffic fines, school fees, insurance, debt and endless increases, the hope is that the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's speech will carry some much needed good news, not false hope. Tebogo Msimanga, SABC News, Kimberley.
Welcome back. Let's continue with more news. Friday marks UNESCO's International Mother Language Day. It's a celebration that has been observed globally for 25 years. So locally, the Durban University of Technology and Gcina Masiko Trust They planned a 2-day commemoration. The event kicks off with a day-long program at DUT's City Campus. It's followed by a second day of celebrations at the Bluff. That is happening on February 22nd. Most notably, Durban holds the distinction of being UNESCO's only city of literature in Africa. So joining us now to discuss the significant event is Dr. Gcina Mhlophe, founder of the Gcina Masiko Arts and Heritage Trust. Dr. Gcina, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us here on the SABC at this hour.
A very good afternoon to you and the viewers. It's an honor to be here.
Let's get your perspective, perhaps lay out the land for those who are not really familiar with the significance of the day and why it is so important to observe. What is it really all about?
Ngiyabonga. To celebrate indigenous languages all over the world is something very, very important. And the fact that there's a special day designated for this is special to us. Because we are the kind of people who are like language soldiers, really. In all the work that I do, I always encourage people to celebrate their own mother tongues. And we use different languages, of course, in order to communicate with people from different cultures. When there's a day like this, and we have partnerships that are as important as the Durban University of Technology, I'm very grateful for us to be able to work in this manner. Also with the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, KwaZulu-Natal, we shall be having panel discussions, we shall have poetry, storytelling, we will have people giving talks about the value of indigenous languages, sense of identity, sense of belonging, and knowing yourself, really, having a sense of self. So that is the significance for me, and it's crucial that we encourage each other and the young ones.
Language soldiers, I think that was aptly put, that you definitely have a way with words. And I know that when you speak in someone's mother tongue, you speak to their heart. And that, also assists in effective communication, cognitive development. There's also just, the foundation that needs to be set for a more well-established emotional connection as well. I wonder if we can look at how both informal and non-formal modes of learnings can contribute to, what is happening beyond the classroom and how it can further be supported, given South Africa, its unique situation with, its 11 officially recognized languages and the many other dialects.
That's so important, what you're asking. It's so important to know that learning doesn't only happen in the classroom. It must start at home. The home is the central fireplace, really, where everything happens. When parents, grandparents communicate to young people, there's a way of speaking. I remember a young boy who was asked, how do you know that somebody loves you? And his response was, I feel that my name is safe in their mouth. That's a child who comes up with something like that. And so when you speak to somebody in their mother tongue and you say their name and you also are able to encourage them and praise them when they do good, even when you correct them and explain why, because little people always ask why. I was one of those why children. So it is very, very important then for us to know that when that foundation has been laid and the child goes to formal education, we must give them all the knowledge that they can receive in the educational institution, but not forget what they have learned at home, a sense of respect, knowing where you come from, and also having dreams, imagination. When you dream and imagine in your own mother tongue, you can translate it into any other languages. But when you do that originally in that language, it is the true you that is speaking. It is the true you that is dreaming and planning and working hard towards whatever you want to achieve. Yeah. I find also that some people find it difficult to say certain things when they are campaigning for something that is very global, like people who are working with HIV, AIDS campaigns and what. They always come up with these global terms. Can you say it in Setswana maybe? Yeah. Can you try it in isiZulu maybe? They don't know how. So yes. All of these things we must be able then to find it first in our mother tongues. In isiZulu we say, my mother tongue is ulimi lebele. That means the language that I sucked from my mother's breast. How awesome is that?
That is, you're preaching right now, because I actually wanted to get to the issue of Afrocentric approaches and even just the importance of narratives, agency as well, because the story of the world is incomplete without our version. But that comes with being able to tell our stories in our languages. And so even the work that you've done with the foundation, the partners that you've brought on, how have you contributed to completing the story of the world by asserting indigenous languages as well, home languages?
One of the things that have happened a few years ago, we worked with a jazz band, we went into the studio, we recorded 18 songs, the rhymes and rhythms that we grew up with, because many of the children that are growing up today have got very young mothers and young fathers, as you know, and they don't know the rhymes and rhythms we grew up with. And so I decided, instead of criticizing, moaning is boring, exactly. Really, it's better to do something about it. So now that we've recorded this music and all these chants and rhymes and rhythms, and then there's that soundtrack with the beautiful professional music. The children love it, but the parents also, they start feeling the vibe, and they're thinking, I never thought this thing could be jazzy, and so we need to find ways of taking it to the present. And people sometimes are very nervous about the books that are written in African languages. Publishing houses or bookshops, they say African languages don't sell. They don't sell if we don't promote them. If you can promote washing powder every single day of our lives, hello, you can promote African language books as well. So all of those things are very, very important. And then I look at some of the games. We're talking about AI all the time. Some of the games that are there, we can take what comes from the old days where our grandparents were, where our parents, where my age group was, and we take it to the present, to the future. And when the young people lay their hands on these computers, on this software, and on these programs, they say, Mama, Baba, I can do it like this, I can do it like this. And we sit in wonder at how fearless young people can be. So we must teach them what we know, but also be prepared to let them fly. And that way, we're able to do intergenerational collaborations, the same thing with inter-language collaborations.
I'm so glad you touched on the point of the fourth industrial revolution and even just digitization, AI at large, because that is the way the world is going. It perhaps even broadens the scope because there's more accessibility, if other inequities such as data access is mitigated again. So thank you for speaking to that as well. You also spoke about accessibility. And so obviously it's going to bring into question who owns the value chain, distribution as well, the publishing houses, that's also the adverts, the narratives that are portrayed through that. So accessibility, affordability in preserving, that's going to be very key. I wonder if from your vantage point, if you think South Africans care enough about preserving their languages and what more then can be done at this point, given our history of, oral traditions, music, dance, folklore.
Our people care enough. I promise you, they care enough. With our flagship project, Nozincwadi, Mother of Books, this month alone, February, I have traveled to 3 different corners of South Africa. I was in Umgungundlovu working with the predominantly Zulu-speaking communities and schools and elders. And then the following week for International Read Aloud Day, I went and worked with young teachers and teacher assistants and doing workshops with them, empowering them. What do you say in English? George, English is limited, man. So helping them, sharpening their skills, let me say that. Yes. And then telling old stories and also sharing how you use a book in order to entice young people. You look at illustrations, you look at how you use your voice. So all the different levels are possible. I was in the Eastern Cape in a place called Somerset East, KwaNoJoli. I came back this past week. I'm quite tired. I'm trying to pretend I'm not. I went to Vembe district in the Limpopo province. Oh my God, the rain did not stop us. The rain did not stop us from celebrating books. I was taking books that are translated into Chivenda to those communities. In the Eastern Cape, it was isiXhosa. In KwaZulu, isiZulu. So for me, I don't joke when I say languages are crucial. And people celebrate this. They are so grateful that you thought about them. You brought books in the language that is their own primary language. It is up to us to embrace the different languages and honor the people around us. And if you don't speak the language, get a translator. Don't say, I don't speak fluently a particular language. I'm not a fluent speaker of the Tshivenda language, but I love it. I promise you. But when you get there, you get a translator, and I bring my books that are translated into Tshivenda. And then you come to Braille. My books are coming out in Braille as well for children who are blind or have got problems with seeing, visually impaired. And then we've got one of my books has come out as a sign language video. And I'm preparing that we shall have exactly 13 of my books coming out as sign language videos. Why 13? Because KwaZulu Natal, in South Africa, in the African continent, our calendar is the 13-month calendar. So I've chosen that 13 of my books will come out in sign language videos. And unless we do something about it, we do not have a right to complain and criticize and point fingers at other people. Let's be active.
Well, beyond it being a constitutional right, every day is Mother Tongue Day. So thank you for weighing in. I actually just want to get your thoughts as we wrap up. There's events that are obviously happening with the foundation at the Bluff as well. So over the two-day affair, I mean, just walk us through what really, those who want to attend can actually anticipate.
Yeah, at DUT, we are so excited. The program is vast. Starts in the morning at 9 until 4 p.m. There will be sign language translators, by the way, throughout. There'll be sign language translators. There'll be different presentations and music and poetry and storytelling and the panel discussions, of course. And there'll be jewelry designers talking about what inspires them. And so that's what's happening at DUT. I'm so happy to be working with DUT. And then that's Friday, 21st. On the 22nd, we are under the storytelling tree at the Bluff Showgrounds. We've got people so young, from 3 years old to their 90s. They come from different communities, and we shall have schools like from Umlazi. We shall have schools coming from Maritzburg. We shall have schools, young people performing from Inanda. There's a beautiful school called Ketogutle. The talent is phenomenal. And there will be also poets. So besinobut page, lapo besiperformela, sizobe no puti siyabonga, osis pretty. We're going to have amazing talents, osis Mindlovu performing with us, some of the team of Gcina Masiko. And also we shall have people talking about indigenous food and nutrition, because this year we are saying my health is my mother tongue. So we're going to be talking about looking at food as a healing part of your journey as a human being. So it's broad. International Mother Tongue Day at DUT on Friday, the 21st, and then Saturday, the 22nd of February. Azishe, let's celebrate our languages, every single one of us.
It is a holistic approach. Inkosi kakhulu, I should say ngiyabonga as well. Thank you for your time. We'll leave it there, Dr. Gcina Mhlope, founder of the Gcina Masiko Arts and Heritage Trust, weighing in ahead of the 21st of February. As we know, we're looking forward to International Mother Language Day. That's happening on Friday. Again, thank you to her for joining us and for weighing in so passionately. She's a language soldier, and all of us are reporting for duty. Let's leave it there. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the week ahead. Let's continue now. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa has delivered a leadership that will respond to challenges facing Africa, while the president spoke to the media on the sidelines of the summit.
We are very pleased with the outcomes that we've had in this summit. The election of the new leadership of the AU, the election of the chairman of the assembly, and the election also of the chairperson of the African Commission and the deputy chairpersons and the other commissioners. So this is a very good outcome for us as Africa. We're consolidating the African Union to ensure that it continues to unite the continent. So we're seeing progress here, and we're also going to continue seeing progress with the discussions that are going to go on. Because we didn't come only for elections, we came for real discussions and decisions. So this has been a good summit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Djibouti's Foreign Affairs Minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf has been elected as the new African Union Commission chairperson in Addis Ababa. He defeated other contenders like former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga and former Foreign Affairs Minister in Madagascar, Richard Rangiamandrato. While the seasoned diplomat has vowed to drive transformation and ensure that Africa is placed on the global agenda. He succeeds Chadian former Prime Minister Moussa Faki Mahamat, who is stepping down. Yusuf is going to be facing quite a number of challenges as the continent grapples with the conflict in the eastern DRC, the civil war in Sudan, terrorism in the Sahel region, economic integration issues, and also climate change at large. He has pledged to push for reforms within the African Union to ensure that there is accountability and also to promote the bloc as a formidable organization to champion the interests of Africans. Meanwhile, Angolan President João Lourenço is the new chairperson of the AU. It's a position that rotates amongst the heads of state. French President Emmanuel Macron says he has discussed the situation regarding the ongoing violence in the DRC with President Félix Tshisekedi. Calls were made for an immediate ceasefire. Meanwhile, M23 rebels have called on residents of Bukavu to set up vigilante groups to prevent mass looting. This comes as the rebels advance towards the city centre.
People carried looted goods on the streets of the eastern Congo city of Bukavu on Saturday as the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels reached the outskirts. The rebels have been pushing south towards Bukavu, the second largest city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, since they seized Goma, the largest city, at the end of last month. A spokesperson for the World Food Programme told Reuters its depot, which housed nearly 7,500 tons of food in Bukavu, was looted Saturday, adding that the stolen supplies would deepen the difficulties faced by those in need. Sporadic gunfire was heard overnight and into Saturday morning, according to multiple Bukavu residents, who said the shots were fired by looters. A Congolese army officer said soldiers were being evacuated in order to avoid carnage like in Goma. About 3,000 people were killed in the days preceding the capture of that city, according to the United Nations. The capture of Bukavu, a city of about 2 million according to the mayor, would represent an unprecedented expansion of territory under the M23's control since the latest insurgency started in 2022. It would also deal a further blow to Kinshasa's authority in Congo's eastern borderlands, which are rich in minerals.
Let's stay with news further afield. The Vatican has confirmed that Pope Francis will not lead this week's traditional Sunday prayers at St. Peter's Square. The 88-year-old pontiff was admitted to hospital on Friday to be treated for a respiratory infection. A statement says that he has been told to rest.
Pope Francis, who is receiving treatment in hospital for a respiratory tract infection, will not appear in public on Sunday to lead his usual weekly prayer, the Vatican said in a statement on Saturday. The pontiff, who is 88, has been suffering from bronchitis for more than a week. He was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on Friday morning. People were seen outside of the hospital on Saturday, praying for Francis's quick recovery near a statue dedicated to the late Pope John Paul II, who was also treated there during his long papacy. One such adherent was Sister Jean, a passionate nun who lives in Rome, who told Reuters she hopes the prayers support the Pope so that he can continue his ministry. The Vatican said in the statement that the Pope has seen some improvement. Earlier, the Vatican said he would remain in hospital as long as necessary for his treatment. Gemelli Hospital, Rome's largest, has a special suite for treating popes. Francis, who has been pontiff since 2013, has had influenza and other health issues several times over the past 2 years.
Well, that's the first hour of the show done and dusted. Of course, we continue watching the week ahead. We'll be right back at the top of the hour for the second hour of the show, and we'll continue with more news and updates. Don't go anywhere. You're watching SABC News live from Johannesburg. These are your headlines at this hour. Parents in KwaZulu-Natal have been urged to monitor their children for symptoms related to hand, foot and mouth disease as the province records 117 cases.
If we want to move from being research-led
Well, Professor Robert Balfour has officially taken the reins as the new rector and vice-chancellor of the University of the Western Cape. The number of people killed in a stampede at a main railway station in the Indian capital of Delhi has now risen to 18. Police have opened an investigation into the incident, saying they will have to analyze the CCTV footage to determine the cause. Good afternoon. Welcome to the second hour of the week ahead here on the SABC News Channel, DSTV Channel 404. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, as mentioned, we are live from our Johannesburg studios. I am Liesl Wilson, and you're still welcome to participate with us in all the conversations that we're having. You can give us a call on our studio number, which is 011 714 0680 or 81 or ending in 82. It is an honor to have you with us here at this hour. Let's jump into the rest of the show. Well, starting things off now, the KwaZulu-Natal Health Department says it's dispatched officials to screen education facilities for hand, foot and mouth disease after the number of cases in the province increased to 117. The cases have been diagnosed at 10 primary schools and daycare centres in Phoenix, in Greenwood Park and Umhlanga, just north of Durban. Now, the ages of the children infected range from 3 to 13. Officials say that the first 6 cases were reported last week.
Parents in KwaZulu-Natal are being urged to monitor their children for symptoms related to hand, foot and mouth disease. The disease is a contagious viral infection that causes flu-like symptoms, mouth sores and blisters on the hands and feet. Infected children can also suffer from fever and sore throats and show signs of irritability and loss of appetite. An expert in the health department says the virus is spread by direct contact with saliva or mucus.
Currently, we're sitting, as of last night, we're sitting at 117 cases, and we have more than 10 schools. Those schools would include your primary schools and the early childhood development centers. But what has been like what we have seen in most of the children are the blisters, which is one of the symptoms. The blisters would appear inside of the mouth. They will appear in the palms and the soles of the feet. And so that would make the child, struggle to walk and struggle to handle anything. We advise that you go to the health facility or the private doctor that is closer to you to seek medical help.
The health department says officials have started testing for the disease at affected educational facilities. Mhlongo says the virus is not uncommon, but that they are concerned about the outbreak.
Teams are out there, even the school health teams, they are visiting some of these early childhood development centers just to screen for those that are symptomatic. And I think already there was quite a number that they've visited, and then those children that were showing symptoms, then they refer them to the nearest health facilities. In terms of this virus, normally you would have it at this time of the year during the summer and autumn months of the year. And eThekwini have seen these cases before, but they were sporadic, so they were there was no cluster. I think what is different in this time around is that we have quite a number of clusters in different early childhood and primary schools. Hence now it's a concern, but just we have seen this disease before, but very sporadic, not an outbreak.
Mhlongo says the public shouldn't be alarmed as the disease isn't linked to the foot and mouth disease transmitted by livestock.
It's not the same as the foot and mouth that normally affects animals. It's not a zoonotic condition, the one that we have, meaning that it cannot be transferred from the animals or transmitted from the animals to the human being. So if you have cows, don't be worried and try and isolate those cows because they will transmit the disease. It's totally different disease.
The department has urged parents to be cautious and to seek medical attention if their children present any of the symptoms between 3 to 5 days of infection. She also warned parents to refrain from self-medicating blisters at home, as these are said to be relatively painful. For SABC News, I am Jade Paulser in Durban.
Let's continue now. The Home Affairs Department has detained model Chidima Adechina's mother in Cape Town. Adechina entered the Miss South Africa pageant but later withdrew. She also won Miss Universe Nigeria last year. Investigators from the Department of Home Affairs, assisted by the South African police, detained her mother, Angela Rungo, at a property in Cape Town. According to a statement, the department withdrew Rungo's South African documentation in September last year after finding out that it had been fraudulently obtained, rendering her ineligible to continue residing in the country. Now, the department says it appears that Rungo has defied her undesirable status through her Mozambican passport. Well, the new rector and vice-chancellor of the University of the Western Cape, Professor Robert Balfour, has been officially inaugurated. The Civic Centre in Cape Town played host to the occasion.
Robert John Balfour is the 8th rector and vice-chancellor of the University of the Western Cape. In his inaugural speech, Balfour said, among others, that the university is a place of resilience and that this proud past must be built on.
We need a collective set of what I would call critical conversations in our institution, where we consider afresh what it means to be optimally functioning, relevant, inclusive. If we want to move from being research-led to a leading research institution, we must be motivated by a commitment to inclusion, diversity, and enablement. Now, invested in those three small words is a huge idea of social justice. That ethical commitment which touches on the lives of all South African universities differently, but it should make UWC distinctive.
Balfour says UWC is situated in a place where people who are poor live and work, and community, among others, must be a focus during the work that lies ahead.
In the coming 5 years, our collective work on what I have termed the UWC way is a means of developing a shared understanding of the commitment to harmony of work, harmony of workers, and harmony in the work that we do together. It's not a soft, intangible harmony, but rather a commitment to identify dysfunction with a view to creating synergy, to optimize processes to create effectiveness, to remove obscurity to create transparency, to identify distrust so as to establish trust.
The University Student Representative Council welcomed Balfour and pledged support for a close working relationship that centers around students. Many challenges will have to be addressed.
The accommodation challenge is not just a concern, it is a fundamental need. The question of land and accommodation will always be with us, and we must find a way to address it for the students who call UWC a home. The SRC can vouch a day does not go by where a student comes to us and say, ooh, angina res. I do not have accommodation. I am not financially cleared. I am not registered. And so, Prof, the accommodation question is a task and a priority that I believe we should spearhead. The third and the last thing, Prof, UWC students don't just need an institution. They need a home away from home. A place where they can thrive, feel supported, and know that their university cares deeply about their success, both academically and personally.
The Chancellor of the University, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, praised the student-led initiative, the Ikamva Letu Fund. This to support those who cannot afford fees, books, or accommodation.
I invite you to join me in championing the Chancellor's appeal for the Ikamva Letu Fund. Every contribution, no matter how small, is a step towards making certain that no deserving student is excluded from the university because of financial hardship.
The Minister of Higher Education have pledged her support for the new rector and vice-chancellor. She also announced the conclusion of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme Board.
I wish to indicate that ship, I want you to listen. The person who is going to be, or who is the chairperson of the board, is a woman. Dr. Karen Stander is the newly appointed chairperson of NSFAS board. We believe that is going to turn around the institution.
Mariska Botha, SABC News, Cape Town.
All right, as we continue with more stories now, another issue coming to the fore. Hunger appears to be one of the factors leading to students dropping out at some of the further education and training FET colleges in South Africa. FET colleges are vocational schools that offer career-orientated education and training, and over 60% of learners who enroll for the National Certificate Vocational Qualification drop out before completing the NCV at Level 4. With the Minister of Finance expected to table his budget, it remains to be seen how much will be allocated for higher education.
There is a high dropout of learners in the further and education training sector, and the reasons for that vary. Not having enough information on the courses that are offered by the FET is also a challenge.
When we check in our registration times, most of the time, you find that a student might have a matric or grade 12, and then they register for NCV, which is equivalent to grade 10, 11, 12. And along the way, they then see that, no, actually, I am going backwards because they are doing almost similar things to what they were doing in high school. And then they then decide to drop out and go maybe enroll again somewhere else, maybe another level, which is they're supposed to be in the nated side of things. So there's that issue of lack of information that I feel the community is not really aware what NCV is or what the TVET sector is.
Finances are the reason that lead to students dropping out.
And most of the students who drop out are those students who probably failed or didn't do good in the previous years. So at school, when you don't do, or if you don't pass all your subjects, you have to pay, the subjects that you didn't pass, you have to pay that certain amount. So most students, they come from unprivileged families. So that could be the problem. It's actually the problem because last year in my class, there was this lady, she didn't do well on one subject and she had to pay the amount that she owed. So she didn't have that certain amount. So now she dropped out.
Not only NSFAS is the only problem, but we do not talk about mental issues in school, chronic diseases, and how we are not supported in school. Because we come from different backgrounds, you get that a student is not just only a student, but a mother at home, taking good care of the little siblings at home, and coming to school and everything that, it buries everything and it leads to dropouts. And again, financial aid. NSFAS is a huge problem. It is a huge problem simply because most students are not well informed with the information.
Most of the students who drop out because some of the students' background, it's not fine because we are coming from different families anyway. So some of us, we are living alone. We don't have parents at all. So we will be applying for NSFAS. So after applying for NSFAS, we'll be accepted, fine, and then we'll be coming here, FET, college, motel, and then we'll be looking for school. After you just applied and then you have accepted at school, I think is that our school rules, it's not, I think it doesn't sit us well because some of their rules are hard to us.
Socio-economic challenges are some of the problems that students face when they enter the colleges.
You must remember that we have learners that are child-headed family children. They look after their young ones, their young brothers. Some of them are worried about their next meal. So another issue that the Premier and the Minister has talked about is the issue of teenage pregnancies. So it's various reasons why young people are dropping out, but I'm glad that there are programs that the government has put in place to support those young learners.
Information in the sector suggests that many of these learners leave the program to pursue other opportunities, while others stay in the system until they can get NSFAS funding. Ishmael Mudiba, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
We'll stay with education matters. Hundreds of returning students at Wits University have embarked on a hunger strike until all of them are registered. So yesterday, they entered its second day, and returning postgraduate students say that it will continue until their demands are met.
It's been a week since all South African universities started the academic year, but some returning students cannot register.
Returning students rather remain unregistered, and a huge chunk of those unregistered students are postgraduate students. And what we're faced with now is that on the 21st of February, registration will close.
Many of these students burdened by financial constraints like financial exclusion, not being eligible for bursaries or financial aid.
When you speak about the issues of financial exclusion, that is where students who are academically deserving students cannot be able to come back within the institution and get enrolled, particularly because of their economic background, particularly because they are poor and they cannot be able to afford. You find that the university requires them to pay 50% of their outstanding debt.
Earlier this year, the university said it had cleared student debt amounting to 63 million rands for 800 students.
We've made great strides in recent years to assist students with funding. Last year, we administered about 1.8 billion rand in funding. That's in NSFAS funding, in financial aid, in scholarships and in bursaries. Out of the 1.8 billion, which included the NSFAS funding, we committed 180 million rand from our council funds to assist students with scholarships. We have a Wits hardship fund that's roughly about 100 million rand that helps students in need at the beginning of the year, both to register and to secure accommodation, that's emergency accommodation.
Despite health concerns, it's unclear when the strike will be called off. For now, it's just water for these students who are adamant they will only have their next meal when their demands have been met. Lopang Alamu, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The week ahead continues. So today, we're also exploring the cutting-edge world of drone technology, its potential to revolutionize career paths for young people. We're also looking at how drones are transforming industries such as agriculture, mining, and surveillance, and what this means for the future of work. But what's even more exciting, of course, is the potential for young people to really start to build their careers within this field. The opportunities are endless, from drone piloting to data analysis and, of course, innovation as well. So to share a little bit more, some of the insights perhaps on these opportunities and more, we're joined in studio by Cameron Fafarat, Managing Director of Rocket DNA. Cameron, good afternoon. Thanks for making time to be with us here.
Thanks, Liesl. Lovely to be here.
I was telling you offline, it was disheartening to see some of these stories with in relation to education in South Africa. And so it's really, essential that we look at some of the alternatives given where the world is heading. As I wonder, for those who are not privy to understanding what drone technology is all about, talk to us about what it is, your experience through Rocket DNA as well. What are some of the various applications for it?
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting field because there are so many industries and applications for the technology. And I think leading into this interview, I asked myself the question, how many industries aren't impacted by drones? Because if you look at industries like agriculture, construction, engineering, the medical field, deliveries, retail, film, entertainment, there's a whole host, and that's purely where those industries benefit from the solution. But in saying that, there's a wealth of skills and employment that gives rise as a result of it. So a fantastic opportunity, and I think, as you said, a nice silver lining considering some of the other ongoings in media at the moment.
So let's get into some of those opportunities then for those who couldn't get into university or just fascinated by, the world of drone technology and what it entails. What does that value chain look like?
I think the departure point for most people is around drone piloting. So you would immediately think the opportunity is to become a drone pilot. In saying that, some of the other opportunities, obviously with it being legally mandated by the South African CAA, or whichever CAA you form part of. There are posts that you need to occupy in terms of quality and safety and maintenance and technicians. You need to have software engineers, you need to have data analysts, you need suppliers from a hardware point of view that can support this ecosystem. And if we look at some of what's been happening around Ukraine and some of the other ongoings and, you know, the US banning Chinese hardware, there really is a massive wave of growth, depending on which country you look at, you know, 5 to 10% growth in this space. So those are some of the areas in which people can get involved from an employment point of view.
South Africa is seen as a leader in drone technology on the continent. I just want to look at some of the growth and future opportunities as well, given that it's affecting so many industries. Let's look at that for those future projections.
So I think the big one for us, perhaps as a business, drones aren't really that new. Maybe let me start there. You know, 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago, we got the licenses to fly, the bulk of the entrants who were early on in the game, but that's been going for a while. That's kind of the status quo. The biggest change in the industry, and it's not in South Africa, it's not in Africa, but it's global, is this concept of remotely piloted drone docking stations. In other words, from the studio right now, we could launch in an air-conditioned environment, drinking an espresso in Mpumalanga or Mali or Mexico, multiple missions. And that's a trend that's come into the space, and drone as first responder, and it's really disrupting the drone sort of ecosystem. What it means is that the countries and companies who lead in that will be the go-to for this technology. So I think for context, essentially you'd have, in our case, you have one pilot who can pilot 5 stations, multiple locations, hundreds of kilometers away for different applications. And so that's really exciting. And as South Africans, we really are really proud of what the SACA has done in terms of the approval. And we're seeing countries in the DRC, in Ivory Coast, in Zambia reaching out to us to support them. So we're in a great position as South Africa to impart those skills and, you know, develop business here.
I'm thinking about ethical questions that also arise given, you know, the use of it. What does that look like currently for South Africa in terms of usage and what's permissible?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 sides to this. The one is obviously your ordinary drones where pilots are in the field. There are requirements around the distance you can fly, the height you can fly. As an entity, you as an entity, the individual flying and the drone need to be in legal standing with the CAA. There's also a split between hobby droning and commercial droning, of which hobby is probably 10 times the size in South Africa of normal commercial drone applications. But on the piloted side, it's pretty well known, avoid aerodromes, national key points, those sort of things. And a lot of people are frustrated by that, but if you look at the news of late around a lot of the tragedies that have happened, they're really there for our safety. You know, if you and I were on a plane to Cape Town from Joburg, we'd want to know that those protocols are in place, safety protocols, purely to protect us, you know. So in saying that, those are some of the ethical considerations. Obviously, things like protection of personal information is a big one. When you see your neighbor flying a drone over his barbecue with his friends, you sort of think, is this guy filming me? But the second side to the answer is the remotely piloted docking stations. We have to evidence, and we've done this with the CAA, very clear safety protocols that we'll follow. And, you know, we totally respect and appreciate the requirement for that, and we've satisfied a lot of those. And now it's really change management to make the operations and customers believe that we can do it safely.
So let's look at Rocket DNA's program. I mean, the certification that comes through it, what are the skills that are also imparted then in you playing your role in pioneering this or taking it to the next level?
Yeah. So I kind of, my view on it for anyone coming into this space is we've got what you call a remote pilot license traditionally. It's now called a remote pilot certificate, an RPC. There's a lot of acronyms in aviation, so I'm going to try my best to explain them all.
Remote pilot certificate.
And that's really your ticket to the game. So if you wanted to get into drone aviation, generally speaking, whether you want to do that as a post holder in a general function like sales and marketing, or purely to pilot and look at data, that's really your starting point. So to abide by the SACAA's requirements, and it's very common in other CAAs, you know, across the continent. So you'd need that, and then there are other mandated courses like what we call BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight, where you're flying where you can't see the drone. So you lose sight of it. It's not VLOS, which is visual line of sight. And then there's courses like CRM and AVSEC and dangerous goods. So we really get audited very similarly to airlines. And again, it's probably a good barrier or layer of governance because it means that drone operators do so responsibly. But that would be your ticket. Where I think the industry is perhaps falling short, and we started our ATO purely because we wanted to train our own pilots.
Okay.
We felt we needed a better standard of training, but over and above that, if you wanted to fly drones for a wedding as opposed to a pre-blast flight on a mine, as opposed to looking at the yield of cocoa production in Ghana, they're very different missions. And so for us, we've brought into our training an element of customization to say, this is what you need to consider in terms of the drone and the sensor and the software and the way in which you fly. So that context is key. Otherwise, you're sending pilots into positions where they're not really best equipped for that.
I'm thinking about affordability and expenses as well. How's that factored in? But even if we're going to be looking at partnerships between government, other educational institutions as well, what more could be done on that front to support?
Yeah, so from a cost point of view, I think comparable to tertiary education, within a 1 year space, it's not nearly at that same level. Turnaround time, depending on the existing condition of the person applying, is about 3 to 4 weeks in terms of getting their certification, which is really attractive. A lot of parents are thinking, what do they do with their kids? This concept of gap year, you could put them through this and they could do this for a year and get exposure to the workplace. Where could government and other people in this ecosystem get involved? Again, there are multiple applications. We've counted cattle. We've done inspections on solar parks. The applications are vast. And I think the starting point is to educate industry, or rather better inform industry around the value adds in terms of safety, efficiencies, and analytics for better decisions. And then from a government point of view, to potentially look at funding ideally more training institutes, physical training institutes and online throughout South Africa, because a lot of our solutions are sought after in countries outside of South Africa. So you're not only benefiting from an economy point of view in SA, but you're providing that to other countries, and that revenue sits in our GDP effectively.
So whilst we're navigating job opportunities for the youth, you've obviously come out to play your part. Thank you for being part of this discussion and for sharing this useful information. Perhaps we can assist all those who are obviously tuned in. But Cameron Pfafferat this afternoon, Managing Director of Rocket DNA, weighing in on the use of drone technology, the lay of the land in South Africa, and really way too from you in terms of growth and future prospects as well. So we'll leave it there, take a quick ad break, and be right back after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The week ahead continues. Leading pension fund manager Alex Forbes has released key findings from a study that it conducted, of course, following the implementation of the two-pot retirement system in September of 2024. After surveying a cross-section of its pension fund members, it found that 76% of savings pot claims made were from members between the ages of 31 and 51. It also noted that 94% of the claims made were from those earning salaries below 550,000 Rand. And it saw withdrawals from right across different sectors of the economy. Let's take a look at this.
The two-pot system was designed to improve the chances of better financial well-being for pension fund members when they reach retirement, while balancing that with the need for them to be able to tap onto their short-term savings pot. Alex Forbes' survey got a sense of what pension fund members had done with their withdrawals.
So what we did see coming through on the survey is members indicating that where they have decided to take money from their savings pot, they've used that to try and reduce some debt. So 50% using that to reduce debt, and 30% of members using the money to cover essential living expenses.
The survey noted that claims were made from those working in different sectors across the economy, with, for example, 24% of the claims coming from the wholesale and retail trade sector, 10% from the mining sector and 9% from the manufacturing sector, with people who likely had been grappling with the higher cost of living crisis tapping onto their funds.
So we did see claims coming through at all income categories, but by far the majority being in sort of middle to lower income categories. Now that does make sense in a way, because at lower income categories, people are using a larger proportion of their income to cover essential living expenses.
Alex Forbes says by the 30th of November 2024, it had received more than 348,000 claims worth around 6.5 billion rand, significant volumes to process, but it's credited its digital platforms for enabling efficiencies.
In the first month, being September, of the total claim volume, 65% of it was received in the month of September. So really significant volume in that first month, and especially the first 2 weeks. So that did put some pressure on systems, but at the end of the day, our teams managed to process these claims within an average of 8 working days.
Overall, Lang believes the new two-pot system has managed to strike the balance between ensuring long-term retirement savings while fulfilling shorter-term essential needs.
But the two-pot system now provides that ability and really gives a balance and flexibility to members to take money out before retirement if they really need it, and if they have no other options. But then at the same time, there's the 2/3 of the contributions which gets preserved into the future. So I think the two-part system is doing a great job of what it intended to do, and I think is serving the needs of our members.
At the end of January, the South African Revenue Service announced that it had received over 2.6 million applications for tax directives for withdrawals from the savings withdrawal benefit of the two-pot system, indicating that a total gross lump sum of just over 43 billion rand had been paid out by the end of January. Nampumela Losiziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
In other news now, Deputy Minister for Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, Naren Singh, says more collaboration is needed between his department and the Departments of Basic Education and Higher Education and Training. He says this will help educate younger learners about pollution as well as studying and employment opportunities in the field. Singh was leading the SA Gallus 2 Open Day and a demonstration cruise at the East London Port in Eastern Cape. The aim really is to educate learners and impart knowledge to educators and scientists alike, among others, about the role played by the vessel in maritime research.
Scores of East London residents, including learners, parents, government officials and scientists, got a glimpse of this cutting-edge maritime and biodiversity research vessel. SA Gallus 2 is a groundbreaking research ship that is meant to carry out both scientific research and supply South African research stations in the Antarctic. Parts of this research content includes marine, environmental, biological and climate research. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment says educating younger learners from as early as primary school about these key research points will help, especially in pollution control in the country.
We've got programs, outreach programs with DFFE. We are going to work very closely with education, Basic Education, to make sure that we get the message across loud and clear that it's through carelessness, recklessness of society, greed of business people, polluting the air, etc., that causes damage to the atmosphere, and we've got to prevent that at all costs.
High school learners say this tour has helped to enlighten them about various career opportunities in the maritime sector.
I've seen how the technology works in the ship, and it just gives me more information on what I know, because I want to go study, I want to go on a yacht when I'm out of school, and it just gives me more information about everything and how everything works.
I've learned that in a ship like this, the biotechnology and all that's very essential for the studies taken on the ship.
I've learned a lot. I also learned about climate change and how it has an effect on the ecosystem, and how everything starts off in the ocean and how they take samples. And this also interests me because I do geography at school as a main subject, and I'd like to further that into my career.
The Deputy Minister says the country is looking to expand investment in the maritime economy. He says this investment will see South African universities produce more graduates in the field. The research ship is expected to depart the port of East London and dock at the port of Cape Town in the next 2 days. Sidima Mveku, SABC News, East London.
Welcome back. Let's continue news abroad now. The number of people killed in a crash at the main railway station in the Indian capital of Delhi, it's now risen to 18. Police have opened an investigation into the incident, saying that they will analyze CCTV footage to determine the cause. The incident occurred on two platforms as passengers waited to board trains in Prayagraj city, where the Hindu Mahakumbh festival is being hosted. The death toll included 10 women and 3 children. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and some other federal ministers confirmed the stampede incident in posts on X without disclosing the death toll. But an inquiry has been ordered into the incident, and 4 special trains were dispatched to evacuate the rush caused at the railway station. India has witnessed several rail accidents in the last 2 years, including a collision in 2023 that killed at least 288 people. Staying with news further afield, families of Israeli hostages in Gaza have called on Israel's President Benjamin Netanyahu to bring the hostages home first before phase 2 of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal begins. The ceasefire's second phase is meant to usher in negotiations to return the remaining living hostages amongst the 251 who were seized. 19 Israelis and 5 Thai hostages have been released. It's part of the deal so far, with hundreds of Palestinian prisoners released in return. There are still 73 hostages still in captivity, around half of whom have been declared dead in absentia by Israeli authorities.
Reunited with their families after more than 15 months in captivity, these 3 Israeli hostages were released by Hamas on Saturday after mediators helped avert a collapse of the fragile ceasefire. In exchange, Israel freed some 369 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who arrived home in buses to cheering crowds. Earlier, the 3 Israelis were led onto a stage in Khan Yunis, flanked by armed Hamas militants. They were then handed over to the Red Cross to be escorted to Israeli forces. Families watched the live broadcast as the trio was safely released. Many unable to contain their joy at seeing their loved ones again.
We saw him alive and walking on his own feet, and I can't explain. It's just so, and I don't have words for this.
Israeli forces transported the trio back to Israel via helicopter, where they received a hero's welcome. Busloads of Palestinian prisoners then arrived in Ramallah in the West Bank. This man said he had been detained for over 23 years, but that the last year and a half had been the most difficult. The swap allayed growing alarm that the ceasefire agreement could unravel before the end of its first stage. 19 Israeli and 5 Thai hostages have been released so far. 73 are still in captivity, with around half of them declared dead in absentia by Israeli authorities. Prospects for the survival of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas have been shaken by US President Donald Trump's call for Palestinians to be resettled permanently out of Gaza. Trump has said he wants the tiny enclave to be turned over to the US and redeveloped as a seaside resort. That idea has been rejected out of hand by Palestinian groups, Arab states, and Western allies of Washington.
On a lighter note now, it is double the fluff at a theme park in Hong Kong as twin panda cubs came out to play. Climbing trees, tumbling off slides, and napping in a hammock, Hong Kong twin panda cubs, they're set to make their public debut. The 6-month-old siblings, it's a female and a male, nicknamed Elder Sister and Little Brother. They were born at the city's Ocean Park and now join 4 other pandas at the theme park. Their mother, Ying Ying, made history as the world's oldest giant panda on record to give birth, delivering the twins just a day shy of her 19th birthday. And since then, panda decor and promotions have mushroomed across Hong Kong. Let's continue on the week ahead. The South African Endurance Series 2025 is set to ignite motorsport passion. This as it kicks off at Swartkops Raceway. It's happening between the 21st and the 22nd of February 2025. Now, as the first race of the season, this event will set the tone for a year of high-octane endurance racing, bringing together top drivers, top teams, and motorsport enthusiasts from across the country. This year, the SAS is committed to expanding the reach of motorsport through engaging with local schools, petrol heads, and even industry leaders who will be helping to elevate the series profile and attract new audiences. Now, the lifestyle aspect of the event will also be in full force, ensuring that motorsport remains a premier entertainment experience. But perhaps to tell us a little bit more, we are joined online by Wayne Riddle, CEO of the Southern African Endurance Series and reigning SA national champion Xolile Letlaga. Good afternoon to the both of you. Thank you for making time to be with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Afternoon. Thank you for having us.
What an exciting...
Afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right. What an exciting time. Wayne, let me start with you. Perhaps you could riddle us this. Take us through the relevance of the event and what it means for motorsport enthusiasts at large.
So I think as the owners of the series, we're entering our fourth season now.
Yeah.
We ended up with a cliffhanger at the end of our third season at Kailami in November. There we had 16 countries represented, and it was a grueling race, and it went down to the final, I think, 10 or 15 seconds of the championship. So it was really nail-biting. We are starting this season off exactly where we left off last year. We are one car shy of having a full grid, the maximum capacity that's allowed on the Swartkops facility. So we are very, very fortunate that our competitor base is growing and the interest is growing. Ticket sales have been manic over the last couple of days, so that's looking good. But this year we also we offer more to our audience. We don't just offer the endurance race, which is our premier category. We've now got some support races as well. We've got the GT Cup, which is a one-make Porsche Cup series that's racing with us. We've got 17 Porsche Cups racing against each other on the day there. We've also got the Sport and GT category that has joined us. And then this year we start our tour also. Who's joined us is the motorcycle fraternity. So we have over 40 motorcyclists that have entered for the weekend. So we're very, very excited about all of that.
Well, speaking about where we left off from last year, Xolile, let me bring you into the conversation. It's been said that this is ultimately about bringing motorsport closer to fans whilst growing the sport's presence in South Africa. Talk to us about how this is going to be achieved from your vantage point.
We've always had, as a series, we've always had this dream that we would make motorsport inclusive, would make motorsport reflective of the demographics of our beautiful country. We have this big ambition that one day soon, we will try and make sure that places like Soweto, Tembisa, people that have not been involved in motorsport. I mean, if you look at our media numbers, the biggest viewership and the biggest interaction that we found on our media numbers comes from Soweto. So it is only best that we work with brands that identify this new market, that are willing to chant the enchanted waters and take motorsport to the people. This is one thing that we are striving to do, so that we can bring a big return of investment to our would-be sponsors that we don't have now, and people that would want to support motorsport wholeheartedly.
Well, thank you for those remarks. Wayne, let me go back to you just on the back of what Xolile has echoed. Because the event is committed to expanding the reach of motorsport, I mentioned schools are going to be engaged, petrol heads, the industry leaders as well. Just talk to us about how exactly this is going to be done in the build-up.
So look, last year we brought over 600 students from previously excluded community schools. We brought them to the racetrack. We gave them a behind-the-scenes tour and explained to them that they were the ones who chose their subjects, the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They elected to study those subjects in the higher phase of school. And we identified to them that those subjects that they chose are the base subjects that you need for career choices in motorsport as well. Unfortunately, there's no mainstream university for motorsport. So with our development with the Africa Race Together Foundation, Motorsport Foundation, our aim is to identify those top achievers that have an interest in motorsport and help them advance their education, their careers, and then ultimately get them to springboard into motorsport. So that's one of the initiatives that we have taken, and we're going to do more of that this year as well. As we move around the country, we will engage with different schools and bring students out to the school specifically on the Friday and let them come and get it behind the scenes, meet the drivers and understand the sport of motorsport rather than just the race driver. You know, if people only know the race drivers, and if you look at Formula One, and I use one of the popular teams, the Red Bull team, I have this big photograph that I have on my phone always, and it shows prime in the view is the two racing drivers up front. But very few people pay attention to the 360 people behind them who have made those two drivers the success. So Africa Race Together's initiative is to grow the behind-the-scenes element and create career opportunities. It's easy for us to identify a race driver and pay him and sponsor him, but that's one person that you're enriching. If you're getting the whole team behind, you're creating opportunities of employment for hundreds of people rather than just individual race drivers.
No, well said, Wayne, absolutely. And there's an entire value chain that can benefit, that also needs to be highlighted. Xolile, I just want to ask you, the interest of time, what are you looking forward to the most as we anticipate what's set to come the 21st or the 22nd of February?
Yeah, well, wearing my hat as a race driver,
yes,
and the current defending South African champion, we're looking forward to creating history. We are the first men of color to be champions in an endurance race. We are the first diverse team to win an endurance race in 30 years or so in South Africa. We are now looking to be the first team that defends this prestigious title and create history by doing this. Why is this important? As a team, we have been striving to be better at what we do. We have spread our wings to go international, taking everybody in the team to go learn how things are done in Europe and how race teams are managed and how drivers are enhanced to perform better. So if you ask me what we're looking for and what we're looking forward to this year, is to becoming better as a team and create history by defending this championship for the first time in its history.
No.
So have a champion defending.
No, those are certainly wise words. Xolile, thank you for weighing in. Wayne, just as we wrap up there, I just want to look at international best practices as well, and really how we're faring at this point. What are you excited and looking forward to the most as we edge closer?
So I think if you look at Europe as a best practice, I think we're almost equal to a European standard. We've taken a best practice policy 3 years ago, and we've honed it and refined it to a point now where I don't know, it might be arrogance, but I think we are the best promoter of motorsport at the moment in the country. We are pulling the numbers. Our viewership is over 1 million views. Our social media's organic growth is over 1 million. So at the end of the day, from a European best practice, I think we're right there. I think we tick all of those boxes. What can I look forward to this year? This year's going to be a tough championship. It really, really is. We have 33 cars on the grid for the first race. Zwartkops facility only allows 34 cars, so I'm one shy of a full grid. I don't think there is a category that has run that nationally in this country. So I'm very excited by that. It's going to be a really, really busy day. We got the support classes. And so I'm excited. I think it's going to be a very, very tight championship. We race all over the country. We're in PE after that. We go down to Cape Town in June. We go to Kailami in July or August. Back at Zwartkops in October. So it's really busy.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Xolile, for joining us. We're wishing you all the best of luck. The 21st and 22nd, of course, all things motorsport. Wayne Riddle, CEO of South African Endurance Series, as well as a reigning SA national champion, Xolile Letlaga, joining us and chatting about that upcoming event that's taking place at Zwartkops Raceway. Again, we have come to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in. That's where we leave it for the week ahead. For myself and the crew, it's been an absolute pleasure. Until next time, take care. It's goodbye for now.